Well, good morning. Good to see all of your smiling faces today. Thank you for coming out and being a part of our service here at Victory Church in beautiful Chattanooga, Tennessee. You know, it's always better when you're here because you add a part to the service that nobody else can, and we'd appreciate you going to the effort of being a part. I know that there's a lot of you that are joining us out there, but I appreciate it that you're here in person today. We want to continue on what we've been talking about. Today will be the fourth week that we have taught on God's plan for your family. Now, it has been, and I'm almost ashamed to say this, it's been like 8 to 10 years since we've taught on this. It's been a long time. And Beth and I used to teach on this a lot, especially when we first got into the ministry. We would travel to churches teaching on the family and child training and things like that, and we just haven't in the last several years. So we thought it was a good time, and it seemed good to the Holy Ghost and to other people that had encouraged us that we need to teach on it again, to go ahead and teach on the family. So last week and this week, Beth joined us and is going to share some things also with us. I like her perspective. If she's not up here to help me, it gets lopsided because I shift everything towards the men. I just think, you know, and have for a while, if men are acting like men and doing what they're supposed to do, the family kind of falls in line like it's supposed to. Now, I'm not saying it's not without challenges, but I'm saying that typically when when the husband is strong spiritually, things seem to go better. Unfortunately, in our society, and it's been since we were young and even probably the generation before us, unfortunately, that hasn't always been the way that it's been. You know, I remember growing up, you would see in churches by far more women with the children, and the men would be at home. Now, not every family, but you know, you saw that a lot. You very rarely saw men coming to church and the wife staying at home and the man bringing children. And that happened rarely, but maybe every now and then. So it seemed that it was the women that were carrying the church. It was the women that were stepping in, and praise God, that they were holding the family together. So when I teach on this without her, I really focus a lot on the men. Even when I address the ladies, I wind up going back to the men because ladies, I'm sorry, if your husband's a zipper head, this is going to be a lot harder for you. So anyway, so Beth's going to help me with some things again today, and I want you to be turning with me in your Bibles to 1 Peter chapter 3, and we'll go ahead and turn to I call it our jumping off scripture. There's so many verses that we could go to on this, and we've looked at several of them, but one of the things that I want to do, I'm just going to kind of set the tone here in the first few minutes, and then we're just going to share stories. Beth and I have been married. This year will be 46 years. We met when we were 12 years old in the 8th grade. We have known each other a long time. And I know you look at our marriage now and you think, my goodness, their marriage is perfect. And you would be right. It is perfect. I have to say that when she's in here. So, but one of the things that I was sharing with somebody the other day, the main challenges in our marriage, as you know, there are challenges in every marriage, but the main big challenges in our marriage are kind of in the rearview mirror. That there are things that happened years ago that we worked out. She doesn't yell at me near as much now as she used to. So we don't have to deal with stuff like that. So 1 Peter chapter 3, we're going to go ahead and get into the word here. We'll just go ahead and look at verse 7. Husbands, likewise, dwell with them, that's your wife, with understanding, giving honor. That word honor is the word for esteem, dignity. All right, and you go, I'm glad y'all are sitting down for this next part. This is the word also translated some places in our Bible as money. Yeah, that's that word right there. Dwell with them, with understanding, giving them money, or honor, esteem, as to the weaker vessel. And that's talking the weaker vessel physically. We've talked about this before. And as being, and I love this next phrase, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. One of the things that I want to encourage you with is this. I remember when we first got married, and this was, this wasn't right away. This was several years into the marriage, because when we first got married, I was trying to be the head of the house, and I wasn't sure exactly what a head was. So I was working through some things. I knew it was important for me to be a spiritual leader in my house. I knew that, but I was just learning how to do it. It was real important to me. I had shared with Beth before we got married that I was going to find out in the Word what a good husband was supposed to be, and I was going to become that person. I shared that with her several weeks before we got married. And on our honeymoon, we went to Orlando, and oh man, God, it was terrible. The parts of it that were terrible. The week we got married in August. And the week before we got down there, they had sprayed the orange groves for bugs. And so what happened is all of the bugs, the little fruit flies and gnats, they had left the orange groves and they were everywhere else. And you would step out of your room and you were swatting gnats all day long. It was over 100 degrees every day, the whole week that we were down there. We went over to Disney, and at that time, I'll tell you how long ago this was, the frame, the Epcot, the golf ball at Epcot, they just had the frame up. That's how long ago this was. They didn't have any awnings out for you to, when you were out in the sun, there were no awnings. It was, it was fairly new at this time. We've been married a long time, as I mentioned. And we got it there, and God, it was hot. So the bus that we got on every day, we'd drive by this hotel, and out in front they had a putt-putt course that was real grass. Wasn't the carpet, it was real grass out there that they had manicured. So Beth, we went by there, she said, that would be fun to play that. I said, well, honey, we can do that. We're on our honeymoon. We can do whatever we want to do. So we stopped the next day, asked the bus driver to let us out. As he made his rounds the next time, coming back through, he was going to pick us up and then take us on back to the hotel where we were staying. So they let us out. We went out there and played putt-putt. Did I mention it was 100 degrees? I didn't mention that part, didn't I? God, it was hot. And so we were out there playing putt-putt, and we got through, and we waited on that bus, and we waited on that bus, and we waited on that bus. And the bus never showed. So we start walking back to our hotel 4 miles away. It was 106 degrees. It got up to 138 that day. Gets hotter every time I tell this story, doesn't it? It was 106 though, no kidding. And so we're out there and we are walking, that's 4-lane highway. We're walking in the side in the sand. When it's 106 degrees outside, the sand is hot. And my little bitty wife had on sandals. I had on tennis shoes. And so we're walking out there. And have y'all ever, when you go to the beach, you get those little sand spur things. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Those things hurt. She was getting them, about it seemed like every 10 feet. So we'd have to stop. And so we're going, we are hot. We are dripping. She's getting, I carried her for 12 miles. Vultures were gathering. So we're walking nothing, and so our bus pulls up behind us. We are 200 yards from the hotel. And I thought, for a moment, bless God, we're not going to get on that bus. We're going to go ahead and just walk the whole, but we didn't. We got on the air-conditioned bus and rode the rest of the way out there. So it was, yes, it was, oh man, it was, other than that though, we had a great time down there. We had a really good time. Where was I going with this story in the first place? Do you know? Oh no, thank you. So I wanted to have a good, strong Christian marriage, and I was going to learn to be a good, strong Christian husband. And so we went in the bookstore there at the Regency Hotel, And inside their bookstore there, or inside the gift shop, they had a book rack, and on it was The Christian Family. And so I bought that book and started reading it and got some really good ideas. Actually, I got some ideas from that when I first preached on this a long time ago. So we started going into these things, going into marriage. But you have to understand, back when we were coming along, people were not taught how to be good husbands and good wives. Women, the girls in our generation, they were taught how to be independent, how you don't need a man for anything. You're independent, self-sufficient. Now, we talked last week about this. We talked about how that she did a really good job expressing how she maintains her identity and her individuality in the marriage. And then men were taught that, you find a woman and you make the decision, you just find a woman that's pretty much going to do what you say. Well, I can tell you that didn't work with us. That didn't work big. She was taught to be really independent, strong-headed, stubborn, mean, conniving, manipulative. Okay. And I was taught to, just kind of try to, be the boss. And, and you can imagine, we butted heads quite a few times. So we had to grow. And I had told her that 2 weeks before we got married, we had a serious talk. And I told her during that, I said, listen, the way that I'm looking at marriage is this. I'm looking at this forever. Divorce is not an option. We're not trying this out. And I'm committing myself to you for the rest of my life. And I meant that then, and I mean it today. So when you go into it with the attitude of, look, we're going to make this work, there's not a way out, you work things out. And we both develop that understanding. And so during that period of time, as you start growing, you start developing a trust for one another. But that trust has to be worked on. You have to you have to work at that. It has to be developed to where you start working. So I remember when I got this revelation. I got this revelation that she is like my secret weapon. I've got a secret weapon. I don't have to carry around a gun. I got a pocket Beth. And this is how she's my secret weapon. She sees things that I don't see. Her perspective on things is different than mine. So it's like to my life and my calling, there is somebody that's with me and joined with me that adds to that and enables me to see things in a different light, that's able to express things, that's always on my side, that wants me to succeed. That is so valuable. And when you start recognizing that you are working together as a team, when you're heirs together of the grace of life, you start looking at each other that way. I still look at her today as a precious, precious gift from the Lord. That's the way that I look at her. That's the way that I think of her. My life is so much better with her in it than it would be for me to be by myself. And here again, we've talked about some of these things, and we're gonna kind of get into some areas this morning of what if things aren't going perfectly in your marriage. So where do you go from there? You look at us after 46 years. We weren't like this after year 2. You grow. It takes effort. I hesitated to say that, but it does. It does take effort to do that. And you just learn that each other, you're on the same team. So you learn to walk in these things. You learn to grow. And one of the things is this. People have asked me, because they find it hard to believe, and she shared this last week. The reason I bring this up, she brought it up last week. I didn't bring it up. She did. And that is, when we first got married, she was not the nicest person. And she shared with you last week about that. And she wasn't. And so people have asked, well, what did you do? Well, that's a good question. And the thing that I can share with you and encourage you is this. I believed in the Bible, in Ephesians that we looked at last week, that my responsibility in the marriage was to treat her the way that Christ treats the church. Do you know that Jesus doesn't treat you differently depending on how you act? If you have a bad day one day, Jesus still loves you. If you sin, she didn't. But if you sin, Jesus is still there to help you. Is quick to forgive. And so the way that I looked at it was, I'm responsible for what I'm responsible for. And I'm not responsible for changing her. She's not responsible for changing me. I'm just responsible for what I'm supposed to do. What my part is in the marriage, that's what I'm responsible for. And my job in the marriage is to protect her. My job in the marriage is to provide for our family. That's what the word head means, lover, leader, and provider. My position in the family is to be the initiator of love through the family. If there's anybody in the family that's supposed to be walking in love, it ought to be me. Because I am operating in the role as Christ is to the church. Now what happens is if you're not careful, if somebody does something you don't like, we have a tendency of thinking, well, that's not right. That hurt my feelings. And so now then we start turning our attention inward to where my needs aren't getting met. You're not being nice to me. I have certain rights. Okay, let me share something with you real quick. No, you don't. You don't have rights in a marriage. You have responsibilities. And that's one of the things that I shared with her. I am going to love you no matter what. I'm going to always be here for you, always be with you. So when you start learning, when you start taking your attention and focusing on the other person, things work out better instead of you focusing on you and saying, I'm not getting what I'm, you're not being nice to me, you're not doing this, you're not cooking for me, you're not doing whatever. Now we joke about that, about her cooking, because y'all see her in a different light today. You know, there are sometimes, there's the other day I walked in the kitchen and leaned up against the stove in Burma. I said, what is this doing on? We have potted plants and stuff on our stove because, we won't need it for anything. So, I think we've actually got some socks and T-shirts in the oven. Overflow. But the thing that people don't realize is when we first got married, she cooked every meal we ate. Every meal, when the children were little, every meal that we ate, she cooked, she fixed. She made our own homemade bread. She made garlic chicken. Oh, man. That reminds me. Man, that was good. Chicken divan. She would cook she was a great cook. She's a good cook now. She just didn't like doing it very much. But she, things have changed. So we joke about that. And if you're not careful, you start looking at what you're not getting. And that is selfish, which is the opposite of walking in love. So you walk in love towards your spouse. It's not, listen, did Jesus have people that were mean to him? Yes. The Son of God sent down to save mankind, and there were people that didn't recognize that, didn't appreciate it, attacked him, and were mean to him. Did it change who he was? No. Same thing in a marriage. You focus on what your part is. And so what happens is you allow the Spirit of God, who, remember, that's the third part of your marriage. That's the third person in your marriage is God. And as you do that, another thing is, if you have a problem with your spouse, pray for them. Instead of getting mad at them and criticizing them. Listen, how many of you enjoy criticism? Hands? I didn't say being critiqued. I'm talking about how you're being criticized all the time on what you're doing. People don't like that. Matter of fact, you get defensive, and then you think, well, bless God, if I can't do that, I'm just going to quit trying. And it spirals downhill from that. So don't be critical. But on the same hand, you also need to let the other person know what it is that you expect, the way you like certain things. And you work together as a team. But and Beth really stressed this last week, and that is the importance of you looking together as a team. You're operating together as a team in unity, going about doing what it is that God's called you to do. And when you do that, you are a force to be reckoned with. A husband and wife together in unity, standing on the Word, cannot be defeated. That's the way that things are designed to work. Now, I want to show you kind of what we want to do today. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 14. And then we're going to go to Titus, and then we're going to start sharing some stories with you. 1 Timothy chapter 5. I can't help it. When I get up here doing, I get to preaching. I've thought about doing this full time. You can read the whole first part of this. We're just going to look at verse 14 here. The Apostle Paul writing, he said, "Therefore, I desire that the younger widows marry, bear children, manage." King James Bible says guide, and we looked last week at this. That word guide means it's the same word translated head. And you ask people this question, who's the head of the house? Man's the head of the house, not according to the Bible. The house, the household, the running of the house, the woman is the head of it. Okay, it says right here in your Bible. "Give no opportunity to the adversary to speak reproachfully, for some have already turned aside after Satan." That is when things get out of order in the family. And that's what this is talking about, is how it's supposed to be. So the woman is supposed to guide. She is in charge of the house. We shared last week. If she doesn't like you wearing shoes in the house, take your shoes off. If she doesn't like your deer heads up all over the place, take the deer heads down. Don't pick out the wallpaper. You don't. Because men pick out wallpaper, and what we've got on there is we've got 2 bird dogs and a pheasant flying off on there. That's the wallpaper we like. Women don't like that. Not many of them that I've met anyway. And then over in Titus, just 2 books over, remember the book of Timothy and the book of Titus are written by the Apostle Paul to young ministers. Timothy in particular is a young pastor who pastors the church at Ephesus. So Timothy's responsible for over 100,000 people that attended that church. Now, they didn't have a building like this. They met all over the city. That's why he gives him instruction on, this is how you set elders in the church. These are how bishops are supposed to operate. And so he said, this is how deacons are supposed to work, because you had to have that helps support for that many people. But and then Titus is a young minister also, and Paul is addressing some things also to him about how things work in the church and also how things work in the family. And so in Titus chapter 2 and verse 1, go to verse 3. Says, "The older women likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things." Verse 4, "that they admonish the young women to love their husbands and to love their children." King James Bible says that they teach the young women to love their husbands, and they teach the young women to love their children. Apparently, this is something that the Apostle Paul thought was necessary. And that is, one of the things that happens is the love that a mother has for her children is not necessarily the agape kind of love. Not saying that they don't love their children, but they love them in a way that can be selfish. And in one thing in particular that we learned last week is it's a very, it sets things up. When you put children first place in your household, that's a problem. As far as priority in a household, as far as rank in a household, your first responsibility is to your spouse, then your children, then your parents after that as they get older. Keep that in mind, Andrew, as we get older. So with these things in mind, we're going to share a few things with you. I want to remind you of some that we've gone over as we're kind of setting this, and then Beth's going to come up. Men and women are different, and there are books written on this. There are jokes about this. Comedians make a living off of this. But men and women are different. We think differently. Now listen, thinking differently does not mean the other person's wrong. It means you think differently. We look at things differently. The two of us look at things differently. One of them, and I know y'all have heard about this and you've read books, one of them is just the way that you communicate. And depending on what you're reading, the average woman uses between 20, depending on who you're talking to, the average woman uses between 25 and 50,000 words a day. The average man uses 8,000, not just 8. Not just 8. And so that's why you'll never win an argument with your wife. She has more ammunition than you do. And most of our words have been used up during the day talking about football. So we've used up most of that, talking on that. So now if we get home and get in an argument with our wife, we're going into this battle. We have limited ammunition, so it's just better if we don't do that. But one of the things, one of the best ways to describe the difference in the way that men and women think about it is just by using one word. And that one word is the word fine. A man, when he tells you he's fine, means something entirely different than when a woman tells you she's fine. When a woman tells you she's fine, she's not. When a man tells you he's fine, what he means is, leave me alone. If a wife sees that something's bothering her husband and she says, is everything okay? And he says, everything's fine. What that means is, leave me alone. Because men are fixers. So we're trying to fix it. We're trying to figure out how to fix this. And woman, I ain't got tired to listen to you keep on talking. I ain't got time for you to just sit here and talk to me about this. I got to figure out how to fix it. And so what they will do is they will retreat, or we call, men will go to their cave, their quiet place. Now ladies, can I share something with you? I just want to help you here. When your husband goes to his cave, to his quiet place, don't go in after him. Because if you go in there poking that bear, all of that stress and anxiety that he's dealing with, he's fixing to get unloaded on you. So when he needs to do that, let him go. He doesn't need, honey, you'll feel better if you talk about it. No, I won't. I don't want to talk about it. Yes, you'll feel better. No, I won't. Matter of fact, I'm already feeling worse about it right now than I was before I came in here. So it's just the way that... Now listen, these are generalities. There are some times that she doesn't want to talk about stuff. And when she doesn't want to talk about stuff, I don't drag it out of her. I go to my cave. And now then when you ask a woman, if you can tell something's bothering her and she says, I'm fine, that doesn't mean leave me alone. What that means is you need to start playing 20 questions and figure out what it is that's bothering me. So, when I ask, is everything okay? And she says, I'm fine. I say, okay, animal, vegetable, or mineral? Is it bigger than a red box? Is it... Start asking questions. We're gonna get through with this a lot sooner if I can. When I actually find out what it is, it's like I'm expecting prizes or something. It's like, I've won a game show or something. Woohoo! I figured out what... Now, figuring out what it is and solving it is two different things. And one of the things that I found out, my lightning fast mind, I found this out after a long time of marriage. I find out when things are bothering her that she doesn't always expect or want me to fix it. She just wants somebody to talk to about it that's on her side. And so you know what you do in that situation, man? You be a good listener and be quiet. Don't start interrupting her on how to fix it. Well, I'll tell you what, this is what you need to do. She doesn't want you telling her what she needs to do. She just wants to talk. So, listen to her. Not while you're doing something else. Not while you're checking things on your phone. Not while you're looking past her at the TV. When we go into restaurants now this is interesting. When we go into restaurants, if they have TVs up there playing, I sit down with that TV to my back. Because I'm only human. And if there's a good game going on behind her, I'm not going to hear a word she says. Now then, the thing about that is, she is really sweet now. And so when we go into places like that, she'll say, well, honey, I know a game's on. Why don't you sit over here so you can watch it? And isn't that sweet? The answer is yes, it is. In case you were wondering what the answer was. So men and women think of things differently. Men are able to compartmentalize. We're able to, we have like little bins or boxes that we put stuff into, and those bins don't touch any other bin. So we can be upset in a particular area, and then you get to talking about this area, and we're fine. That's why a man can forget about things quickly. You get into an argument with your wife, if you're not careful, she'll start bringing up things that hadn't even happened yet. Yeah. Because she remembers, because she operates more out of emotion. And when you have emotion tied to an event, you remember it. So they'll remember things a lot better than what men do. So men, when they're dealing with things, they have little compartments of stuff that they do. And this is one of the things. See, this is when you're trying to get projects and stuff done around the house. That focusing in on one thing, and women are wonderful multitaskers. They can do all kinds of stuff. A man focuses in on one thing. If we're looking for an address, we turn the radio down so that we can see better, because we want to be focused on stuff. And I remember one time years ago, we were at our little old house in Pinson, Alabama, and so we had some friends over, and the girl and Beth decided that our kitchen needed to be wallpapered. And so I had been dragging my feet on this for a while, because I don't look at things the way that she does. She goes by lists. She makes lists and marks them off. I don't do that. As a matter of fact, when we first got married, one of the first Saturdays that we were married, she handed me my list. Sweetheart, thank you so much, but if I had wanted a list, I'd have made one myself. Thank you. And she hadn't given me very many lists since then. So and I agree, okay, we'll go ahead and do the wallpaper. She's already bought the wallpaper. So we get started. We get started at 8 o'clock that evening, stripping the wallpaper. So the two of them are stripping the wallpaper. Well, about 12 o'clock, they said, okay, it was time for them to go home. I said, no. There ain't nobody going anywhere. Y'all are the ones that said you wanted to wallpaper this kitchen. We're blessed God wallpaper in the kitchen, and we're staying here till the job gets done. Well, they left about 2 o'clock, and bless her heart, she stayed up with me till about 4 or 5 in the morning. And at 7:30, I finished. Now, the thing about that is, ladies, sometimes when you ask your husband to do something and he resists, it's not that he's necessarily trying to be lazy. Now, he may be, but it's not necessarily that he's trying to be lazy. But what happens is, typically when a man gets on something and concentrating on something, he stays on it until he gets through with it. And so he understands this is going to take a lot more work than you think it's going to. We're not going to do this in 2 hours. This is an all-night project. But we look at things. We look at things differently. So you have to learn that with one another. Beth is goal-oriented. I'm people-oriented. Can you tell? I like relationships. I like communicate. I like talking with people. I like visiting with people. I like trying to help people. Beth wants to make lists, and she has goals every day of the world for her to accomplish. So we look at things. It doesn't mean that one's right, one that's wrong. It expands our reach. All righty. Okay, little B. Now would be a really good time for you if you would like to come up.
Okay.
I'll show you how far I've gotten to, and it's about halfway through the page. You'll be glad to know. I think we're about right in here.
I think you covered most of them here.
I did. I think I even
There's
covered...
not much left for me.
I covered some of your stuff.
Yes, you did, dear. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm just trying to help.
So, okay, I'll just use the word Robert in this example.
Robert story.
The Robert story. Many years ago, at a church we went to, some friends of ours, the husband was very electrically minded. I mean, he could fix anything with electricity. He even made all kinds of electronics, and this was back in the 80s, okay? And I just admired that so, and I thought, wow, what a smart person. So we were around the house one day, and we needed to do something. I said, well, honey, I think you need to call Robert. And he said, why? And I said, well, Robert knows how to do that. And he said, well, I think I can do it. And I said, okay. And he got through it. And then later on, something came up, and I said, you know, Robert does that all the time. So I probably said that. Now, I didn't say it a lot in one day, but, you know, over the year, I probably said it, I don't know,
500
maybe
times.
20 times.
500.
Because I thought Robert could save us all kinds of time, all kinds of money. Why don't we just get Robert? Finally, one time he said, I don't need you to ever tell me again to call Robert. And I thought, why not? What did I do wrong? And I realized to him it sounded like I was saying, well, Robert can do anything and you can't. That's not what I meant. I meant, let's save a lot of time and money and you could learn. This is great. But it didn't come across that way. So that's one thing I learned. Don't tell your husband to go call someone that knows better or that kind of thing. So we don't call Robert.
Haven't called him in years.
We don't call Robert, right.
How about if we get Juanita to come over and fix us a meal?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm not fixing the meal, so
I don't know why.
Let's
I don't
see.
know Juanita.
What else there were so many things I was thinking about when you were talking, and they just kind of went in and went out. One thing I've learned over the years is when he would do something to me that would hurt my feelings, I would get upset and pout. And I don't know if any of you have ever been pouters or maybe been married to one, but I would just get all upset, and my response was anger and then pouting. And one day I was somewhere, I can't even remember who did this, but I was around someone, and when their husband did something and they got embarrassed, that lady said, well, you've kind of embarrassed me. And I thought, what class? That lady let her husband know she was a little embarrassed, and yet she didn't get mad. She didn't stomp out. She didn't cry. She didn't pout. She just said, I'm kind of embarrassed here. And then everything just kind of turned around, and I thought, what a great idea. Just say, that kind of hurt my feelings, or I'm a little embarrassed. Let's don't do that again. And it saves us so much time, because when I would pout, that was good for a good 3 days. I mean, 3 days I could have a long pout, you know. I mean, I'm not speaking for 3 days. And now we don't have to do that. I can just say, that was embarrassing, or I don't want to talk about that because that hurts my feelings, or something like that. And we just say, okay, and we pass that one right on by. It really saves a lot of hurt feelings. Now that works for us. And of course, we really aren't saying we've arrived, and we aren't saying everyone's like us. We realize people are different, sure. And I think that's one of the main points, is to figure out what works for you, you know, what's important. One thing I used to teach young wives when I did this years ago is to find something that you really like about your husband and really brag on that. Especially really young wives. When we were first married, he would do just something that I didn't think he should do that way. I mean, it could be anything. Maybe you didn't put that light bulb in like I thought you should. I don't know, anything. And fine, of course, I would complain. But I realized, you know, every wife, there should be something you like about your husband. I mean, you married him. So surely there was something. Maybe he was very kind. Maybe he was a great athlete. Maybe he was very smart. Maybe whatever. Maybe he's a great dresser. I don't know, something, right? But every guy's got something great about him. So I thought, okay, what do I think my husband's great at? And what came to mind was tennis. I said, my husband is the best tennis player. So I got to where when I would want to complain about him, I would think of tennis and I would say, you ought to go play with my husband. He is so good. Man, he is the best tennis player. And I would just brag on him. Well, people got used to me doing that. You know, everybody knew I thought David was the best tennis player around. Well, one day this new couple came to our church, this new family. And of course I did my thing. You play tennis? You ought to go play tennis with my husband. Oh man, well, he'll probably beat you, but you'll have fun. He's a great guy and he's such a good tennis player. Well, what I didn't know, this was like one of the top tennis players in the state. He was like the best, you know, I mean, he like got paid, I mean, went on circuit, so, you know, and he said, really? I said, oh yeah, really? You know, why don't you call him up? Y'all go play tennis. He said, I think I will. So, so, he calls David up and they go play tennis. David said, wow. You really put me on the spot there because, you know, he didn't realize Johnny was quite a tennis player.
Hey,
but you did good. And I think one of the reasons why he did good is because I kept saying,
I think so.
He's great. He's great. So. Oh, he'll be tough for you. And then I found out he was a circuit or whatever you call those tennis players. I don't know if it's circuit, but, you know, get money. And I still said, but he's still real good. So, you know, I think it made him better. Sure. But it was a way to honor him. It was some way that I could honor my husband. And so that's where I started. I started with tennis. And then after a few years, I thought, you know, he's pretty good at this too. Oh, and this. And so it expanded over time, but you just got to start with something. You know, you pick one thing and say, wow, my husband is the greatest at this. So that's one suggestion I have. One thing about thinking differently, when we first got married, I liked surprises at Christmas. I wanted a surprise every year, something totally unexpected. And so I thought everyone was like that. It never occurred to me that someone didn't think that way. So I would say to my husband, what would you like for Christmas? And the first 2 or 3 years he said, I want one of those little leather shaving kits. And I thought, nah, that doesn't sound good. And so I wasn't even sure what that was, but that didn't sound exciting. So I wouldn't do that. And I would go buy him some great surprise. And he would open it up and go, oh. And you could see him kind of looking around like, where's the shaving kit? And so he'd go, thank you. Well, after about the 3rd year, I noticed one day we were going somewhere and I said, where are we going? He said, I'm going to buy a leather shaving kit. I've asked you for 3 years. And I thought, well, I got you this great surprise for Christmas. He said, well, that was very nice and I appreciate it. But you asked me what I wanted and I just wanted a little shaving kit. So I learned he doesn't like surprises. He doesn't even care.
By the way, that first Christmas, the gift that you're talking about that you got me as a surprise, I used yesterday.
Okay.
I did.
My surprise I got him was this great big, what do you call that thing? It's for tools.
Yeah, it's a chest that has all kinds of, screws and, little
so
things
he did
like that.
it.
And I've had that
but
thing.
It wasn't a shaving
I've
kit.
had that thing now for 4 years.
So I think, did you told the cow?
I did not. You can tell it.
No, I can't tell it. You can tell it better. I'll end with, I'll do the 2-way radio, then you do the 7 count.
Lord.
Okay, this is a true story.
Sweet Lord
This
Jesus.
happened about 10 or 15 years ago, but and it's not about us, but it's a true story. So these people worked together and they also went to church together, and they used a 2-way radio in their job. I don't know if it was like construction or something. So out in the office to the yard. And so they were in their office one day at lunch hour, and their 2-way radio was just on in the background, and they heard something and they said, who is that? Nobody's out in the yard, we're all here. And they recognized a voice, and they all stopped and started listening to this voice. It was a man in their church. Well, they started saying, is that him? Yes, that's him. How is he on our radio? what had happened was this man in their church was having an affair with another woman in their church, and they were on the telephone, and somehow, I don't know, we could ask Robert. Sorry.
Why don't we ask Robert?
Somehow it bled over into the two-way radio, and these men working here were listening to this man talking to his girlfriend on the radio, on the phone. They were planning some rendezvous. Well, they're here listening to the whole thing. And I thought, if that is not an illustration of what you do in secret can come out, wow, that was pretty scary. Not that, didn't scare me. I'm kind of safe. But, so it makes you think about talking on the telephone. Somebody on a two-way radio can hear you.
So if you're going to have an affair, don't talk on the telephone.
Don't talk on the telephone.
Okay, that's what we got out of that.
Okay, I don't know. I think I'm done.
It
Why
was
don't you,
funny.
Why don't
It
you
was-
tell 7 Cal? That's a great place.
Okay. You may have to help me with that some. I hadn't thought about that in years. There was a representative actually of our country. He wasn't an ambassador, but he was representing us to one of the Eastern nations, and so they went into their meeting, and then they were invited over to this man's house, dignitary. And when they got over there, his wife was there and was kind of in charge of making sure the catering and everything was going. And she was people that got around her. She was striking in the way that she carried herself. She was elegant. She was refined. She spoke very well. She dressed very nice, and just you could tell that this was a classy person. And so the man here from America asked one of the people there, said, "Well, who is? How did they meet?" And he said, "That's a very interesting story." He said, "Both of them are from a very poor village. Poor, like only one or two people in the village had a bicycle, poor. And so they decided to get married. They fell in love. And so in their village, and we don't do this anymore. I wish that we would start this practice back, and that is a dowry thing. I think there was something to that. And so it was expected in this village, if you were going to marry one of the girls in the village, then you brought to their father, we would call it a dowry. You brought something there to purchase her, if you will. So this young man was wise beyond his years. And so he showed up at their hut, wasn't a house, showed up at their little hut. And he had brought with him 7 cows. Now you understand, you could get a good wife in that town for a chicken. Okay? So, hey, if you brought a cow, that was, he brought 7 cows and gave them to her father. And from that time on, everywhere she walked in that village, she was known as the 7 cow woman. Now, over here in this country, if you called a woman a cow woman, they get their feelings hurt. But to them, what they were saying was, this woman is so valuable. She was worth 7 cows. Well, they got married. And as they got married, apparently favor was upon them. And the man rose in the political structure and had a lot to do with his wife. His wife was a tremendous help to him. But so here this American was looking at this woman, thinking of how classy and refined she was, not knowing how she had started. And the way that she had started is her husband, when they first got married, valued her so much that he paid 7 cows, and that's the way she started thinking of herself. Men, that's what you need to value your wife that way. She is your crown, your honor. She is a gift of the Lord to you. Amen? Amen. Well, we'll close there for today. We're not through. We're going to pick it up here again next week. And I believe that we'll probably be able to finish it up next week. So I encourage you to be back. My desire for you is that God's richest and best are yours. And remember, there's victory in Jesus. Amen.